You're listening to Myers-Briggs Question Corner with Edith Richards. Hello listeners, David here, coming to you from the Highlands of Scotland. After a few weeks being off the radar, although in all honesty I wasn't completely off the radar, but I have been dealing with some challenges that made it difficult for me, my introverted self at least, to lend my voice to the podcast. However, I'm here this week, and Edith, I have to say I really appreciated that shout-out last week.
You're welcome, David, and I'm truly pleased to hear your voice and have you back on the air. We do have a few regular subscribers who I know tune in every week, and as much as I know you're not going to believe me when I say this, I do think that you're a huge reason for our following. People, and I'll admit it's mostly the ladies, just love your voice.
Well, if there's any truth to that, thank you.
Now, David, before we get into this week's topic, as long as we're on about voices, gotta put this out there. Like many of us, I'm sure you have your professional voice as well as your everyday voice. Would you be comfortable taking off your professional hat for a few lines and sharing your everyday Highland voice with us?
My everyday Highland voice. Well, you might not be able to understand it if I speak the way I normally do, you know. But it might not be like that, it might be like this that I talk. And there's a lot of different accents in Scotland, so it's not easy to do. So I'm probably just better sticking to this.
I love it, David. And this makes me want to take a trip to Scotland even more. But I'm afraid that's going to have to wait for a little while as we're still in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic as we're recording this. Speaking of which, let's jump right into today's topic, shall we?
Right. We're talking essentially about how each of us, you, Edith and I, are coping with the pandemic from a personality perspective. And what that means is me as an INTJ and you, Edith, as an ENFP. So what I'm guessing is that we're going to have very different reactions to having to socially distance and manage our daily activities. So here's what I'm going to suggest. Let's each of us talk about what's going well, what's not going so well, what we'd like to have more or less of, and then, generally speaking, has this pandemic situation taken us away from our natural Myers-Briggs type and forced us to live in areas that aren't natural for us? And how do the people around us factor into this? Not very specific points, I know, but these are just my thoughts to start a conversation on the topic. Edith, what do you think?
I think these are great points to start a conversation and very relevant to the times we're living in. So hopefully our listeners can relate, especially the ENFP and INTJ types out there. I'd like to start with things that have been going well. So for me, and you and many of our listeners already know this, I have a full-time job apart from all the great work we do here and my work with a top career. But like many of you all tuning in, I've been working virtually since March, and being an extroverted type or an E on the Myers-Briggs, I initially thought that the lack of face-to-face connection would be problematic for me. I was concerned I wouldn't be as engaged with my work if I couldn't talk to people in person or present in front of groups and all the things I love to do regularly. Surprisingly, I've handled things really well, and I think that's the adaptability in me. Whenever I've encountered problems in the past, I've just been someone who didn't get stuck on the problem itself, but was able to quickly move through it to find a solution and overcome whatever it was I was dealing with. So I'm using this skill set in the virtual world. And yeah, there are some days that I'd really like to see people face to face. But in place of that, I meet my good friend nearly every day and we go on a daily walk. And this isn't just my exercise time, but it's kind of like my therapy time.
Wow, Edith, I had no idea. As much as I know you like to talk and interact with people, I'm pretty amazed at how you've managed to seem like you've been thriving during this time. And it's good to hear you have that outlet there in your daily walks with your friend.
Yeah, that's been a lifesaver for sure. The other thing that's going really well for me right now is the flexibility that I have. I didn't really realize how awful it was for me to feel like I'm chained to my desk all day, every day, and now I'm able to get up and move around if I need, or take a phone call if I need to, and my wardrobe and my commute just can't be beat.
Yes, working in your pajamas and slippers and not spending so much time commuting back and forth in the car have got to do some wonders for quality of life.
Those are probably the best things about working virtually, I have to admit. And David, how about you? What's been going well for you during the pandemic?
As you and some of our listeners may know, I've worked from home for quite a long time now, so in a lot of ways these times are pretty normal for me. So what's working for me? Well, my work's very much aligned with my Myers-Briggs type of INTJ. It just so happens that my partner is an introvert as well, so neither of us really seek out lengthy conversations. I do enjoy my peace and quiet, and it allows me to focus on my work. Now, when it's time to talk to somebody, I will schedule a conversation, usually on Zoom, and I'll do it in advance, so I've got plenty of time to prepare. I don't like to be caught off guard, and as I understand it, that's a very INTJ quality. So in terms of what's going well, there's not been much of a change for me really at all in terms of work. Now, in terms of seeing family and friends, I don't see them as often, so we get together every couple of weeks and we do a Zoom thing. But again, it's not such a bad thing for me, as I have just a few family members and friends I see on a regular basis anyways. And virtual communications like Zoom really do help.
So mostly, apart from in-person visits with people, life is pretty normal for you these days.
Yes, I suppose it is. Now, as we move on to things that aren't working well for me during the pandemic, the big one, being an introvert, I'm prone to getting stuck in my own little box. And it's quite a comfortable little box, I have to say. I'd stay in it all day if I could. But at the same time, it's not healthy. And you've taught me a lot about this, Edith. This need that human beings have for human interaction. The thing is that as comfortable as it is for me to be in my own introverted space, when I do have to come out, and it's not a question of if, but a question of when, I won't be able to communicate effectively or stretch myself and learn. That's a concern. I suppose we all do have to communicate at some point. I can definitely tell if I'm rusty in my speaking skills, if it's been a few weeks since I've spoken to anybody professionally. Edith, you've talked about coping strategies in a lot of these episodes, and I think these are especially relevant right now. The fact is, we don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic, so we have to be ready for whatever comes. And me, in my little box, I forget about that sometimes because I'm not out there in the world dealing with these things the way other people are having to deal with them. So in a way, I'm very lucky, but I'm also oblivious as well.
Well, David, I guess you haven't been forced out of that box yet. And if or when you are, it can be a shock, but those shocks are the things that create fresh perspectives and new insights. And let's face it, we all have to do things that aren't comfortable for us. But that first step is often the hardest. And once we can get over that little hump, we become more comfortable with the uncomfortable, if that makes any sense.
It sure does. Now, here's another thing I've noticed about myself, and this may also be an INTJ thing. Now, I'm naturally drawn towards what I guess you would call today conspiracy theories. And of course, there's so many going around about the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I've wasted many hours trying to keep up with some of the things that are going on. I'll go on message boards, I'll read up on Twitter, I keep a list of keywords.
Well, to me, that does sound very INTJ, and I'd be curious to hear from some of our listeners if they can relate to this. So for myself, as an ENFP type, I won't say that I'm prone to conspiracy theories because I am, but I'll get bored after talking about them for more than 10 minutes or reading about them for more than 5 minutes. But in that regard, I think we ENFP types are prone to neglecting our daily duties in favor of any squirrel that appears. And one thing that's helped me a lot is having a set schedule. Not too rigid, I couldn't deal with that, but like a general time that I wake up every day and a time frame where I tend to schedule my meetings, another general time frame when I exercise. I think the key for we ENFPs is not to make things too specific or too rigid.
Yes, that gives you the flexibility you were talking about earlier that you need. And we should all regulate our time and not waste too much of it, especially on things that we can't really change or have an effect on.
But just personally, right now at least, the hardest thing for me is that I'd like to have a change of scenery and I'd really like to go on a vacation, but there's nowhere to go. I mean, a lot of the things that are still shut down, and it's really not the time to fly anywhere with this surge that's being talked about, and it's probably not a great idea to travel in general.
That sounds like an ENFP thing, Edith, the need for a change of scenery. That's got to be pretty tough on you during these times.
Well, these aren't easy times for anyone, but we all do what we need to do to get through it. Now, you mentioned something else, David, about how this pandemic may have taken us away from our natural personality preferences, how we've adapted, if this is a conscious choice or not. And it's a really interesting question that you posed. I've talked in previous podcasts about personality and behavior being different, but these are times when they can very much be linked and we may not be conscious of it. I've been talking a lot lately about the need for greater self-awareness. Know thyself. That which you're not aware of, you can't change, and you're bound to repeat. And often we aren't slowing down enough to think about how we're showing up. And it's amazing to me, in a way, how rare it is, even during these times, that people need to take a moment to slow down and really think about how they're showing up. So many of us just proceed through life on our own roads, and we're oblivious to the fact that we're rubbing people the wrong way or worrying needlessly. We get so caught up in our deeply rooted patterns that we can't see what we're really doing. And if we're not even aware of them, we certainly can't change them.
I know what you're saying here. It's very easy for me, for example, to get mired into reading science journals or learning new technology or researching political topics or something. And I have to wonder if that's actually providing an escape. It does feel good to do these things, but time's very valuable. I might get a lot more traction in life if I paused every once in a while to think about how my actions affect others, for example, clients and my partner. I could definitely make improvements there.
Well, it's the hardest thing in the world to look at yourself in the mirror and see all your flaws and then focus on those flaws. But it's the only way to break out of these self-limiting behavior patterns. And I think these times provide us with an opportunity to do this type of self-reflection. We could actually use this time to benefit us in the long run.
I'm just thinking of how this pandemic has revealed to me, at least, how essentially we're human and we're vulnerable. Now, we all have different vulnerabilities, and some may be based on our personalities, but what you're suggesting, Edith, is that we can all benefit of taking stock of what we're feeling, and by doing that and becoming more aware, we can learn strategies to accomplish the things that we want. Am I on the right track here?
You are. This relates to the work that I do with emotional intelligence, and regardless of our personality type, we can all learn better self-awareness tips, and that starts by slowing down and identifying emotions, what you're feeling, and identifying why you're feeling that way. And back to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's easy to cite the pandemic as a reason for us feeling anxious or withdrawn or pissed off that we can't do the things we normally do. But that doesn't tell the whole story. I say try to dig a little deeper if you can, and then start asking yourself how you manage these feelings. What strategies are you taking to deal with them? And then what's the effect on others? As you mentioned, David. More importantly, though, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do to continue on this path or stop feeling this way? And if you can't identify the emotion, you're not going to have the tools to manage it. So really, the most important part of all of this is taking action. And in order to take action, you have to have the insight into what action you want to take.
And that insight can only be gained through, as you said, Edith, stopping to think about these things. This is very much something we can all do more of. And I hope our listeners will find this helpful. I know I certainly do. Now, Edith, we've come to the end of another episode. So I just want to say that I did get a lot out of this one. I have to say thank you.
It's been a pleasure, David. Thank you for joining me today. And stay well.
Thanks, Edith. You too. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favour and give us a share on social media. And be sure to subscribe to Myers-Briggs Question Corner on your favourite podcast platform. I'm David, producer of the series, wishing you all well. Until next time. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you'd like to hear more, or you'd like to submit a question yourself, then you can find us at www.atopcareer.com. Until next time. MBTI and Myers-Briggs are registered trademarks of the MBTI Trust.